New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Guided selling from RingDNA makes your entire sales team more effective by revealing exactly what reps should do and when to do it. Guided selling works by transforming sales data into a curated list of prioritized sales actions. So when reps start their day, they'll never again wonder which prospects and accounts or hot inbound leads to reach out to next. Guided selling even shifts reps' priority in response to real-time buying signals. Finally, even new reps can sell like seasoned ones. Let RingDNA be your guide to success. Learn more at ringdna.com/guided selling. That's ringdna.com/guided selling. It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 691 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. I have a fun show lined up for you today. Joining me as my guest is Michael Gale. Now, Michael's co-author, the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Digital Helix, Transforming Your Organization's DNA to Thrive in the Digital Age. And so, as you might expect from the title of Michael's book, today's conversation is going to be all about digital transformation. The digital transformation that's occurring at light speed throughout the economy and what this means for your buyers, and more importantly, what it means for you. So in our conversation, Michael will share some of his insights about the economic and financial impact of successful digital transformation on those organizations that do it correctly. We'll also talk about some do's and don'ts and how to avoid some of the pitfalls of digital transformation, because there are some. And then we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about what the impact of all this transformation is on sellers and what you need to do as an individual seller or as a sales leader to be the person who will survive and thrive in this digitally transformed world. Now, before we get to Michael, a quick announcement. If you haven't yet joined the Sales House, the only all-in-one growth accelerator for B2B sellers, there's still time to do it before the year ends and before we raise our price next year. So I created the Sales House for one reason, to help you learn how to close more deals, to make you look like a sales genius, to be the sales all-star for your team. And we do this by giving you the knowledge, the wisdom, and the advice you need to become the very best sales version of you. And you get unlimited access to coaching, content, and a community of like-minded, motivated peers who know that to learn more means to earn more. So come be the best version of you in the Sales House. Visit thesaleshouse.com. That's thesaleshouse.com/join, and we'll see you around the house. All right, let's jump into it with my guest today, Michael Gale. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. We were just laughing before we started recording because you and I have tried to do this a couple of times, and we actually talk, but we end up talking about our mutual love and obsession with soccer, and we end up running out of time to record an interview. So this time we're actually recording something.
This is fun. Well, maybe you should be running another soccer podcast that's because this was a different conversation than the normal ones I've heard. So incredibly intoxicating.
It is. It is. We won't risk boring the audience by talking about soccer, but I just want to let you know we could, if people are interested. So let us know.
Hours and hours and hours.
Hours and hours, right? All right. The topic today we're going to talk about is digital transformation. And this is a very interesting topic for me because, especially in the sales world, which we're going to focus on here today, is I think they're making sort of the classic mistakes that you talk about in your book, and that what we're seeing is sort of a digital patina put on existing processes without really transforming things. And for me, transforming means that you're changing the potential outcomes of what you can achieve. And that doesn't seem to be the case. So I want to dive into that with you. So I guess first question really is digital transformation a given? I mean, it's table stakes now, right?
It's set up. So let me answer it in two. Well, I think it's actually beyond that. So I'll give you some setup here. And I think the challenge in a sales conversation is it's almost like when the sun comes up and the sun goes down, the sun comes up again. Just talking about that rotation of daily change in light may be enough for a conversation to sell you something. So there's two things we learned with the research recently with Forbes in the book. Any form of activity associated with digital transformation will generate some sense of positive return. I think less than 1.25% of occasions it doesn't. So it's a super easy conversation to have between a salesperson and a client. Look, if I sell you X or Y, you're going to see a change. So when you ask the question, is it happening? Yeah. Digital transformation is absolutely everywhere. In fact, it's so endemic in every conversation that happens. I think we estimated or calculated rather, there were 14,000 conversations with vendors and customers about digital transformation in major corporations in America every single working hour of the day. It's 28 million a year. So it's like the sun. It comes up, goes down, comes up, goes down. You're going to get something positive if you do something. So for I think any individual that says, hey, my service or product is digitally transformative, you're probably going to pick up something. It's like picking up gold on a beach. It's so obvious you're going to get it, but you're only going to get really small amounts, and clients are only going to get really small amounts of return, because something like 72% of all the net returns that are generated with OPEX, CAPEX, SG&A, brand equity, everything else are going to just 28% of all companies, because those that get it right, and those that get it right with the vendors that sell product or service for them to get it right, are literally laps ahead of everybody else right now. And so when you say it's an imperative, I actually think if those organizations keep going with that lead over time, they will literally put competitors out of business. There's a piece in The Economist yesterday that said something like 75% of active market share is owned by 3 to 4 brands in each of the segments those brands play in. Mm-hmm. So I think digital transformation will not just force a dominance, but could wipe out organizations that are not prepared to do it properly. Sort of, it's a moment to get it right. And if you just want to pick up little flecks of gold on the beach, it's fine. But the guys that are getting it right are laps ahead of the others that are not.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I was really looking at it from sort of two perspectives. One is, and in the audience we have sales leaders and individual sellers and so on who are using new generation of tools and technologies in the selling process. And at least what we're seeing from the data that's out there, and I wouldn't claim that the data we're seeing about sales performance over the last 5-10 years is necessarily authoritative, but we have a number of data points, right? So taken together, if we want to draw some rough correlations, what we're actually seeing is during this period where we've had this unprecedented rush of tools and technologies into sales, is this research, external researchers are saying, yeah, but individual performance is dropping during that time.
So overall, I think it is. In fact, we've gone through the same process, and I think I draw it like this, like a buffet. And there's food all over the table. So you're going to get some of it. You just rush to the table. What we have seen, though, is Pareto's law in extreme examples and sales situations, is that those that are good at adopting the tools and integrating with process are infinitely more successful than those that just use the tools. So yes, you can rush to the buffet, get a little of something, but it probably won't be nutritionally the right value. It may not be the highest value food on the buffet. Is that those that do it really well are extracting more value from these tools than ever before.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of examples of companies that are using the tools, and it's interesting because it's, at least in sales, is the first wave of early adopters of a lot of the new tools and technologies were themselves technology companies, and there's sort of these unique growth curves and patterns in technology startups that are sort of independent, I think, of the tools and technologies they use. Some having to do with the market itself as opposed to their ability to sell what their digital tool is. But as I think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, as I said, it almost exacerbates the Pareto curve. Right.
So you see Citi versus Wells Fargo. And this is a classic sales scenario around this account. Citi had a system that was enabled to build account profiles and account presence and account volume in a legitimate sort of way, whereas Wells Fargo had exactly the same tools, were not able to do it appropriately or properly. And I think you can see this in businesses in insurance, USAA or Progressive versus a whole range of other firms have been much better at using these sales tools to find the right moments, to understand the customer's portfolio, and to encourage sales to have the right type of conversations. So I think increasingly, if you're 5-10% better than somebody year in and year out, which is what we're seeing in the current research, you are going to be infinitely better positioned to thrive in the long run. And I think digital is accelerating, transformation rather is accelerating that differential process. It's like, in soccer, I have to make one soccer reference. If you have a lot of money, if you have a lot of money and you have an academy, you're going to be infinitely more successful than a team with one or the other, or actually not a lot of money either. And I think transformation amplifies differences in behavior, differences in technology, differences in process, and makes those that get it right better and better and better. And while the other guys may be going from 5 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour, they're not going to go to 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. And that's where this phase in transition or transformation is so radical, because it's truly separating out those that thrive with digital transformation and those that are, having a new paint job or a new piece of digital wrapping and getting something, but they're not fundamentally changing the way their business operates at its core.
Well, let's break it down, though, because I think one of the things that really gets lost in the conversation is that at the end of the day, digital transformation notwithstanding, is sales is still about a person talking to a person. Mm-hmm. And so let's take it down to that personal level. So what, I'm me, I'm a seller, say I'm a prototypical B2B seller these days. What do I need to be doing personally to prepare for the transformation, to participate in the transformation, right? To ensure that I'm staying at the leading edge of what's happening individually?
Yeah, great question. I think there are three pieces of paper you need to put in front of you, which is your own personal skilling, the way you frame current conversations, and really how you use data. So let me talk about the personal skilling. What is very clear from all the research we did for 4 or 5 years was that sales functions that work extraordinarily well in a transformative world, their leaders and their players understand this concept of sales moments. Do you know all the moments that your customer or your prospect are thinking potentially about a product or solution or an idea that you can actually connect into? It's one of the things that Amazon does extraordinarily well, is they understand when their sales moments occur. So traditionally, we've always talked about the customer's journey, and it feels very linear. It's not linear anymore. So don't think about it as a sort of moving from left to right or top to bottom or right to left. It's like a Catherine wheel, and you've got to actually work through and understand each of those potential moments when a conversation can happen that's valuable. And that level of account knowledge, that level of market knowledge, I will swear to you, is more important now than it's ever been before, but it's more complicated. It's sort of like on Sundays when people watch American football, they say, yeah, that's offense, that's defense, or that's special teams. Well, if you're an offensive or defensive coordinator, you need to understand at extreme levels of detail what may happen during a game. Salespeople need to understand at extreme levels of detail how this customer's moments or the sales moments occur.
Well, and
that means you.
Well, I was just going to insert for a second, and this I think is really a key point for people listening, is because I've written and talked a lot recently. Gartner has come out with their research about buyer enablement, where they showed their research showing that the buying journey, the buying process is not a linear stage-driven process as sellers envision their process, but it's this looks like a wiring on a on a
Cheers.
complicated electrical system, or throwing two hands of cooked spaghetti against the wall. I mean, it's the connections are not obvious, and the process and the progress, the way you measure progress, is not obvious. And so, to your point, is this idea of being really intimately involved and have an intimate understanding of your buyer and what's happening inside the buyer becomes more and more important. I agree with you.
And you have to live it. You can't. There's no books. I mean, when we wrote, realized even talking to people like Hallmark or USAA or large industrial operations, that level of retraining the sales mind to get away from the journey construct and into this sort of spaghetti of moments is a vital asset you'll have as you move from one company or one unit to the next, because you're increasingly going to become an offensive or defensive or special teams coordinator. You're not just a player. You've got to understand that landscape, how it connects together to be successful. And that demands time and attention and a heightened sense of listening skills that I think we've not seen before. I think is really vital. And that also requires you to be much better at social selling. And I know it sounds like an old-hatted thing to say, but because clients have almost complete control of how they do things nowadays, if you are not connected to seeing those sales moments as they occur, if you're not connected socially in some way to the organization, to other people, to them, it's really difficult to find that moment, that spark in the sky when something happens that's a viable conversation. I'll give an example. Traditionally, markets have quarterly cycle, and they also have annual cycles too, whereby there's key buying parts of the year or parts of the quarter. Well, imagine if there becomes key parts of buying during a day or during an hour, or actually when two or three things collide together. That may completely supersede our traditional view of calendar-based buying cycles. And I think to some extent, really smart sales functions are increasingly rereading these undertones and the sort of tea leaves to retrain their salespeople to be very sensitive socially to what may be a spark or a trigger they can pay attention to. It's not just a press release anymore. If you're going to sell to a large B2B account, you may want to be following, this sounds crazy, the top 1,000 decision makers in that account, literally. And that's a different level of social, emotional, human interconnection than we've ever seen before. But that's how you're going to have to fish for business.
Well, and it's interesting is you hear you say this, and I agree with you. Yet at the same time, these same organizations that employ these salespeople are bringing in these new generation of tools that they say, well, this tool will do that for you.
So I will give you a great analogy why I laugh at that. Because it's like buying one player and assume you're going to win in a game because of one player. It never happens that way.
Yeah, well, I think this is one of the conundrums that we face in sales is that, I would have killed early in my career when I was carrying a bag to have had some of these tools and technologies. But by the same token, I'm not sure I would have been any better at applying them than the companies are today, right?
Well, you could give a medieval knight a spaceship or a tank, but if you don't know how to drive, it's not going to work. So I think it's the old classic field of dreams. It's naive organizations attempt to replace human capital with technology. Really smart digital thrivers know how to integrate technology to make their people the best version of themselves, and if need be, automate some processes that really humans shouldn't be dealing with. And I think that's literally
Exactly.
to me the number one statement is, look, do you want to give a medieval knight a tank, or do you want to teach somebody how to drive a tank and how to use it, also find gasoline, because that's when you're going to get the best value. And I just think any organization that buys technology for technology's sake in a transformative world is putting a patina on their organization, as you've said, and they're not actually really transforming functionality and output.
Yeah, you think of some of the tools that sales organizations use for reaching out to prospects. And there's been, I said, sort of an explosion in the quantity of these tools. And sort of the hallmark they talk about is mass personalization at scale.
But it's actually about personalization in the moment. If you could personalize something to you at 9:15 that worked for you at 9:15, that's what it matters. I put a lot of pressure on organizations like Salesforce because they've tried to fit a very jelly-shaped market into a very fixed bowl, and they've tried to scoop out things of the standard shape.
Mm-hmm.
Great selling is about intimacy in the moment and delivery of the promise. In fact, exceeding the expectation so that your cost of sales reduced and your margins go up because they buy more. That formula has never changed. Technology doesn't have that sensitivity unless it understands the exact moments, which we don't, and it understands the contextual flow of process. And I think that's trying to use a wrench to build a car. You've got to build a complicated set of tools because we're selling to a human point, it'll become like a stock market where 96% of transactions, may be done by AI. But the reality is those transactions are incredibly simple. They're based on one variable, which is price. And humans shouldn't be doing that anyway.
Right.
Nothing else. VCs don't buy companies based on an AI engine, and nor do equity firms, because those types of decisions are complex and require risk arbitration. That's not something a machine is capable of doing around unquantifiable variables.
Well, and this process, as you described it, risk arbitration is something that every buyer does when they're making a decision about who they want to do work with. And this is where this ability for a human to still, as you said, become intimate with and to form a connection with another human, I think, becomes an increasingly valuable skill.
Yeah, particularly in a transformative world where we're so used to, a non-hand touch physicality, but the decisions we have to make are the same as the ones we've had to make before. So, and people always say, "Oh, machines can do it." I'm like, well, if that case, why can't NFL teams hire great coaches? Because surely you could look at their resume and do some sort of psychological testing. And the stats, you'd have a great coach. Right? It just doesn't happen. It's the same with quarterbacks. So even in industries where people are paid, 10, 20, $30 million a year, high mission critical jobs in sport, we've never been able to succinctly use technology to solve it. And that's truly what most sales conversations and sales situations are like. They're not transactional. They're not easy. And there's an awful lot of gray variable management that just can't be calculated on a spreadsheet.
Well, right. They're not easy. Unfortunately, we've got too broad of a segment of sellers who are trained that it is a process. It is easy. If we've defined these personas for you. If you just say these words in this order to this person, I'm simplifying a little bit, but I mean, some of the training sort of falls almost in that category that, you're going to open the door to riches. And it's more, there's more than that.
Yeah, we used to run experiments. I ran a company called Micron back in the late 90s. Sure. And we had about 700 salespeople in a PC environment. So it's a wonderful place for experimentation because they all sat in pods of 6 to 10. And we literally ran living experiments between highly scripted, relatively low paid compensated staff on fairly transactional product. And then we'd run slightly less scripted, then we'd run almost no scripted at all. And the difference in result between the far left, none, same product being sold, to extremely intimate, even on volume, was like 10 to 1. It was a 10 to 1 difference. And it's a highly transactional piece. So humans require humans in order to give, yield, deliver high value, high capability, low return based product. And I think the same is true in a digitally transformed environment, is that to get this right, you've got to understand a customer has a portfolio of experience. There are moments, not journeys, to manage. And it's about how tools make you a better version of yourself, not how tools substitute the human function.
Yeah, I had a conversation. I was presenting to a group in New York a couple weeks ago, and this topic came up about, how often should you go, or should you even leave the office to go talk to a customer? And well, you might think it's funny, but the fact is there are a lot of companies, especially in the software space, that say, look, we don't do that. We can't afford to do it. And so I sort of did a little quiz. And I said, okay, well, who sells product with average lifetime contract value of more than $100,000? A bunch of people raised their hands. I said, well, how many of you go travel to meet prospects? Almost none. And I was like, you're trying to say if you have a lifetime contract value of $100,000, you can't afford a $300 plane ticket to go see the prospect? I said, if it were me, I'd go see the prospect. And if I was your competitor, I'd beat you 99 times out of 100 just by virtue of being there.
And there's a deeper, actually, mathematics to this, which is if you have a lifetime value, you have to sustain something. Humans hold other humans' hands. AI doesn't do that. And secondly, I bet if they'd actually run tests, they'd actually recognize that their failure to run tests in their own environment to validate, A versus B or C is a process, shows a very shallow sustainable equity. Because then what they're doing is being a compliant player in a market. They're not attempting to be a leader in volume or marginal customer equity, and they will get tripped up because you can't try and cut your cost into a sort of subscription business and hope it works. Look at the cable industry. I mean, the story of ESPN is a great example. ESPN was jammed on everybody's subscription for 20 years.
Right.
Half the people that never, ever watched it. They never received a communication from ESPN. They never were treated like customers. So, well, when they could cut cables, boy, did they cut cables. And ESPN's lack of intimacy and connection with those individuals just using their channels has probably destroyed the basic economics of ESPN. And you can see that Disney's contemplating moving, spinning it, get rid of it, because they never spent time generating customer loyalty when they had control.
It's interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, but there's sort of part of the issue is, I think, and this gets back to a broader topic for you, is anytime we have these shifts, these fundamental shifts, the digital transformation being one of them, is sort of the broad swath of the market buys a playbook. A book is written, this becomes the playbook, this is how you do it. And yeah, to your point earlier, they don't really test the assumptions in it because that book was written by somebody that was had a success with a sample size of one. And this is what has happened in Silicon Valley with the way they build teams for SaaS companies, software companies, is based on the experience largely of one person in Salesforce. Smart guy, very smart guy. They had success, but it doesn't work for everybody. This is the playbook that's being forced on everybody. Now, finally, you're starting to see in the last year or two companies saying, well, we all had this model sort of forced on us by investors, and it doesn't really work quite as well as we thought it would.
And people forget with Salesforce, this company originally did very little advertising, did a superbly large amount of local events in Des Moines or Maine or, in Bangor, Maine or in, Tampa. But they got very, very intimate because that's how they learn. And then they suddenly abandoned the intimacy and said, let's just stuff on the digital drivers. Well, what's happened is a lot of the applications they've bought have not had stickiness because I buy A, why do I want B? You never speak to me, never call me. You don't understand my business. And it comes almost down to that McGraw-Hill ad from the sort of 50s or 60s, which is you don't understand my business. How can you sort of ask for it? And I think there's a realize that there's a more complicated economic model behind successful selling in a digitally transformative world that requires the automation at one end and it requires the intimacy at the other to start knitting together. And it's a separation of those functions that I think is damaging businesses. You've got to have intimacy and automation effectively as part of one sweater. They can't be separate pieces of clothing.
And they can't substitute the technology for the intimacy. And this is so tempting to people because sales is hard, right? I mean, it's hard. It's hard to go out and have conversations. It's hard. And if I could find something that's just made that easier or made it so I didn't even have to have these conversations, wow, that'd be fantastic.
If you were a CFO, see, that's a wonderful CFO statement. It's like, selling is like a spreadsheet. No, it's not. It's as Theodore Levitt said, it's the absolute essence of how a company functions.
Right.
And I think the consistent movement away from intimacy. Yeah, let's have our own annual, user conference. It is a really concerning sign of us trying to dehumanize a human process to satisfy bean counters. And I'm sorry to any CFO listening, but there's an outcome of behavior that comes out of this constant anxiety about OPEX, SG&A, that underestimates the equity value. I'll give you a piece of research we just finished. So we interviewed execs in the Global 2000 about digital transformation, and we asked them about a whole range of areas. The 18% that thrive, really do extraordinarily well. If they focus on A, they said they were getting amazing output on, objective areas B, C, D, and E. And what you recognize was if you do it right, you mix intimacy and reskilling and moments and portfolios together, a whole bunch of other amazing things happen. The problem is operational and CFO individuals don't like hearing that because it feels a bit soft and gooey. We're able to measure what the multiplier effect was. The multiplier effect was measured by their customers as 5. So if I try to change sales to be more digitally orientated with all the correct variables, I got other changes in OPEX, CAPEX, things far outside traditional selling because everything is so connected in a digital economy. And that, to me, was the perfect example of this sort of human digital ripple effect and how it should be thought about in sales, not as in like an automated box here. And yes, we go and see the top 3 accounts every year that way.
Yeah, no, I love it. I was just laughing while we were talking about that earlier because, yeah, I mean, you can look at, I see in so many companies that, let's say they're trying to make the transition to more of an inside sales presence, which on one hand, people are saying, well, we're really justifying this because the tools and technologies exist for us to be able to do this. At some level, if you're really transactional, it's fantastic. But you're seeing it trying to be applied into situations where the intimacy is really required, the intimate knowledge of what's happening in the buyer is really required. And at that point, well, that's really being driven by the financial guys. We're staying in the office. We've got this model because everybody thinks it's too expensive to travel. It's like there's this vision you have, this generation of people that are saying, well, back in the good old days, sort of the pre-internet days, people were just traveling willy-nilly, right? They just got on a plane and just left, and
they partied on Southwest because Southwest is such a great airline.
Right. I was giving this example to an audience I spoke with, and I said, well, I spent a good chunk of my career selling really expensive communication systems, infrastructure, millions of dollars worth at a shot, companies around the world. And I might sign, $4 million deal with a company in Europe. I might have seen them twice in person to sign the deal. I wasn't living there. I mean, you have to use travel strategically. You have to have your methodologies to develop either connections and the relationships and so on. But it has to be driven by need, not just by. We seem to have
anybody that really. I mean, I used to run a global business out of Austin, Texas, back in the 90s, from zero to about a $50-60 million IP consulting firm. Trust me, I didn't like flying. I mean, it is an unpleasant experience. And anybody that hasn't done it, that says it's a sort of party activity, genuinely, that's like saying to someone who's putting fires out, oh, that must be nice and warm. It's an awful process. Yes. And yes, mistakes happen because they do. But gosh, the one thing in sales that's true is you learn from mistakes very quickly, or you don't have a job. So it's very questionable if anybody traveling in sales that's not getting returns at some measurable point is trying to abuse the system. It's just impossible. And you wouldn't want to do it. And the system's built to say there's a cost, your time, your travel expenses. If you can't, after a certain period of time, get that to work for you, change the method or change the person. So, to my more nasty response is, unlike financial management models that can be abusive for years before they get caught, salespeople that aren't performing correctly will get caught very quickly. So there's a natural sort of Darwinian cleansing system in sales that you don't see in other parts of the corporation.
Yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. But I think that what people have to understand is, and sort of as a final point we're making here, is as you go through this digital transformation process, it is intrinsically about becoming more human, not less. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, a fundamental misunderstanding people have of this. They hear and they think that, we can use technology, substitute for all these human functions, including sales, which is the most human of the functions that affect your business. And my belief is, and I think you agree, it's actually the opposite. It's actually the demand for the intimacy and the insights and the real deep knowledge about your prospect and the moments, as you talk about, because that's the same term I use, is moments, not processes. We have moments become more important.
Yeah, it's the rarity. It's the beautiful gold block below the surface, even if it's only 3 inches below, that has exponentially more value than ever before. I think that, as I said, 28% of organizations are getting 72% of the upside, of all the upside across all these major corporations, because they're going below the surface to intrinsically change. Doesn't mean you abandon intimacy. In fact, it means it's more precious and it should be managed more. Mm-hmm. But I do think you're right that the sort of genesis of this is this sort of VC funded, cloud SaaS based sales model that feels like, oh, I could just press a button and it happens. That's the magic, zero SG&A. That's just not the way big sustainable licensing deals happen. You have to go and see people. In fact, the best example of this transition being done well, I think, is Microsoft. The way that people like Judson Althoff of others have managed the transformation of the way they sell, and it's a tough journey, I think is incredibly effective because they value intimacy, they value content, they value ideas. They're not going to get rid of it, even though the vast majority of what they sell now is press a button and a license loads. And he's, I think, successful because of that Oracle past where everything was highly intimate. It's just finding that right synthesis, that right cooking point that should be the discussion, not student body left or student body right.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Michael, we're going to have to do this again. This was fantastic. And yeah, we will do it again. But tell people how they can get in touch with you and learn more about what you do.
Yeah, so the book is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's called The Digital Helix. Drop me an email at michael@inc.digital, or frankly, grab me on LinkedIn. I post probably 5 to 7 times a week about this sort of stuff. We're really helping organizations digitally transform all their functions because sales is part of an ecosystem. And our view is look at the book, read the research, and hopefully we can inspire and frankly prepare you to do a better job of it, because the patina may look nice, but the really successful transforming organizations get down to their DNA.
Yeah. Well, and attentive listeners will remember that I previously had Michael's business partner Chris Ahrens and co-author, on the show, and we actually spoke more specifically about the book at that point in time. So if you want to go back and check that episode out, make sure you do that. But Michael, thank you very much.
No, thank you. What fun.
Yeah, we'll chat soon. Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to thank my guest, Michael Gale. Join me again next week as we have actually a repeat episode. I'm going to be on vacation, so we're going to have a couple weeks in a row of repeat episodes, taking some of the best episodes from 2018. Next week, talking with my guest, Harvey McKay. Now, before you go, don't forget to check out Sales House, as I said, the only all-in-one sales growth accelerator for B2B sellers. Visit thesaleshouse.com. We'll see you there. Thanks again for joining me. Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. RingDNA is the leading sales enablement platform that uses AI to help scale business growth. Trusted by the top companies across the globe, RingDNA offers a suite of powerful tools for every sales role. The RingDNA Dialer radically improves sales productivity and call connection rates, while guided selling helps reps know exactly what to do and when to do it. Conversation AI uses artificial intelligence to surface the most impactful coaching opportunities in real time. So, no matter where your team is working from, the RingDNA platform can help them exponentially increase call connections, opportunities, and revenue. Learn more at ringdna.com/platform. That's ringdna.com/platform.